light, period, which then becomes when I saw him outline, in dash, a scrum of light, in dash. What's the difference between those? What's happening in the first iteration?
Going from he's being outlined by the light to like his physical body is the scrum of light.
Yes, right. So we see him outlined in the scrum of light, those things are still separate. The body and the scrum of light are separate in that first line. But then when I saw him outlined and then the end dash just kind of isolate, that's scrum of light, so we have to kind of sit there for a long time, for a little longer, right? A scrum of light, again, he becomes the thing that he was just previously described as, okay? So again, the dad is once the dad, right, a physical person, and then over time he becomes white and luminous, right? Then he becomes a scrum of light. And so then when we look at the first line, like the moon that night, my father, in dash, to the last line, like the moon that night, in dash, my father, which I think is further sort of emphasis and confirmation of this transformation that we've been watching happen over the course of the poem, right? In the beginning, he's just being described like the moon that night, but at the end, like the moon that night, in dash, sort of gives us the space to kind of make a substitution, right? That night, like the moon, my father, we are the same thing instead of the comma in the previous version, okay? So, I think a lot of this work is being done right, making fairly small changes. And I think when we think about punctuation in this way, we can make some really, really big transformations in our work, okay? Let's look over. How many of us are familiar with Hanif Abdurraqib? Yes. So Hanif Abdurraqib is a wonderful poet and essayist as well. And a lot of his poems he writes with using slashes or the ampersand. And so in this comma, you'll see he uses kind of the ampersand as a substitution for punctuation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this poem, and then I'm going to talk about that student example on the bottom. I'm going to talk about why it's there, and then what you're going to have to do as a result, okay? It is maybe time to admit that Michael Jordan definitely pushed off. That one time in the '98 NBA Finals, and in praise of one man's hand on the waist of another's, and in praise of the ways we guide our ships to the shore of some brief and gilded mercy, I touch my fingers to the hips of this vast and immovable grief and push once more. And who was to say, really, how much weight was behind Jordan's palm on that night in Utah? And on that same night 1 year earlier, the paramedics pulled my drowning mother from the sheets where she slept, and they said it must have felt like a whole hand was pushing down on her lungs. And I spent the whole summer holding my breath in bed until the small black spots danced on the ceiling. And I'm sorry that there is no way to describe this that is not about agony, or that is not about someone being torn from the perch of their comfort. And on the same night, a year before my mother died, Jordan wept on the floor of the United Center locker room after winning another title because it was Father's Day, and his father went to sleep on the side of a road in '93 and woke up a ghost. And there is no moment worth falling to our knees and galloping towards like the one that sings our dead into the architecture. And so yes, for a moment in 1998, Michael Jordan made what space he could on the path between him and his father's small and breathing grace. And so yes, there was an ocean between us the length of my arm, and I have built nothing for you that can survive it. And from here, I am close enough to be seen, but not close enough to be cherished. And from here, I can see every possible ending before we even touch. Okay, so what I asked students to do with this poem is I asked them to take any sort of chunk of 3 to 4 lines, it doesn't matter where they started, where they ended, and I asked them to first punctuate it where they think the punctuation would have naturally occurred. And then I asked them to re-punctuate it in an attempt to completely transform something about it, whether that was the tone of it, or whether that was the meaning of it, to just use punctuation alone to change what the text was doing, okay? And so the example that you see at the bottom of the page is what one of my students came up with. And the highlighted part of the poem is the sort of chunk of text that they took. And this is how I would read their version. finals, and in praise of one man's hand on the waist of another's, and in praise of the ways we guide our ships to the shore of some brief and gilded mercy. I touch my fingers to the hips of this vast and immovable grief, and push once more. And who is to say, really, how much weight was behind?
What's the difference between the chunk of text in the actual poem and then their version? What's the difference? What do we feel differently? How do we hear it differently? How do we encounter it or read that differently? Yes?
It's like a lot more spaced out.
Mm-hmm.
So like everything that's said, I feel like you have time to sit in it a little bit more.
Yeah, so it's forcing you to slow down, right? The original version has these ampersands that kind of pull us through, keep pulling us through to the next line, pulling us through to the next phrase, and then just sort of breathless element of the first one. This one kind of forces us to slow down, right? We have to kind of sit in these phrases. Yes, what else?
I think I also can notice, like, when you first read it, the parts that get repeated,
Mhm.
and there's more like repetition, more moments to kind of sit with the, I don't want to keep saying repetitions, but the repetitions that do have the patterns,
Yeah.
that are kind of like forming the initial DNA of the poem.
Mhm. Yeah, we have a lot of repetition that, again, we kind of breeze by because of the pace, right, in the original version, but here, those are kind of emphasized or amplified because we have to pause. Yeah. Yes?
The question mark changes it significantly because now it's asking you something and before, like, it wasn't making you, like, think that you had to answer it. And so that just changes the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. What change did you notice, like, with the question mark?
Well, it just made me think about the line before that, like, about the pushing and how much weight, like, I hadn't noticed that line at all the first time, really. I just, because it was connected to the weight, how much weight was behind Jordan's poem that night.
Yes.
And instead, it's like, how much weight was behind this brief push, and it just makes me feel something. It makes me stop.
Yeah.
I just wonder.
Yeah, so there's an emotional change. Yeah, and when a question is posed, that also is something that stops us, right?
Yeah.
Because we have to then think about something, or we have to reflect about something, or we have to look inward, or we have to look somewhere for answers, right? So the question mark redirects our movement as a reader. Yeah, absolutely. Anything else? What are those brackets?
For me, like, it introduces more, like, ways of reading the poem. Like, I feel like, oh, these brackets, I could read just the line straight through without them, or I can include that in there. It feels like something like a little bit more secret, or a little bit more like sacred, kind of like aside, or
Yeah.
existing like within the poem.
Yeah, so we have these asides, as we call them, which for you created two separate reading experiences. One where you can read or read the segment with them, and one where you can maybe read them without. But you said secret is kind of the word that you used.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I see brackets, and I also think of plays, screenplay, stage directions. And so I also see this as a way of directing where I'm looking, or directing my eye in a very particular way. As if introducing you to kind of like where we are. So like finals, that's where we are. And then we're talking. And then it's like an on the way. So my eye is just kind of sort of being directed to all these different places. I also, and I told the student this as well, I said, this also feels particularly sensual. And, you know, we've all heard the original poem as I've read it, and there's nothing really sensual about that original version. And yet, in this version, there's something I feel very sort of private and sort of secretive about the way that this version works. There's something that feels very sort of sensual about, you know, on the waist, in the brackets, my fingers too. Like there's something very, very, I think, secretive and private about that, we're kind of being let into that space, which feels a certain type of way, like I feel like I've been shooting almost a little bit, right? And so this example, I think, and I love talking about this example, is a really wonderful way to look at how we can sort of transform something with just the punctuation and completely change how it reads, completely change how we feel, right, our emotional response, how we're directing our reader to look at something. And that is now what I'm going to ask you to do. Go ahead and flip over that page. Okay. So here we have a poem by Diane Seuss from Frank Sonnets, a really wonderful book. I'm going to go ahead and read this poem out loud to you, and I'm going to sort of read it where I hear the pauses happening. And then I'm going to ask you to do the same thing I've asked my students to do with the previous poem, which is to take a random chunk of 3 or 4 lines. And then I want you to sort of add your own texture with both punctuation and italics in a way that transforms that chunk of text somehow. And then we're going to use our handy dandy expo markers, and we're going to have a few brave souls put their read punctuations up so we can visibly see some of the choices that you made, and then we can talk about them. Okay, from Frank Sonnets. It's a time of spring when the mulch ads come. And so I remember cedar mulch that smelled like a hope chest, pine mulch dyed the color of hair dyed bright red. In the year, my ex brought cocoa bean mulch and our lives smelled like Hershey, Pennsylvania. I guess those are the things I didn't appreciate enough. I appreciated other things, like when I remembered to pick up the baby from daycare, but I digress. I think there's still half a bag of mulch in the garage, which is damp, since baby by then a teenager shot out the windows, and a squirrel with his BB gun. And now that he's a man, he still talks about hating himself for the squirrel. That was the year after his father left. The same year, I think he was 13, he sprayed Angelina Jolie in purple on a big piece of plywood and leaned it against the stone wall where, as a toddler, he stick the little glass animals that used to come in red rose tea boxes into gaps between the stones. But once his father was gone, the mulch was gone, and then heroin and meth and crack and weeds and Angelina in the garden. Okay, let's do 5 minutes and punctuate.
So you can start anywhere and end anywhere, right?
Yes. Okay. Start anywhere, end anywhere.
2 more minutes. One more minute. All right, go ahead and try to round up those punctuations. All right, we have 2 or 3 brave souls who would like to share their repunctuations on the whiteboard so that we can discuss together. The scary part.
Should I write it up on the board?
Yes. Thank you.
Volunteer. Someone from the back who wants to volunteer in the last row.
If it makes you feel any better, these are technically not your words. Someone else wrote them. Just saying.
Blame the original.
Yeah, you can blame the original text if if you feel some type of way.
we make these punctuation choices, I would like to hear how you intend us to read it. Take your time, it's your way. You got this.
Now that he's a man, he still talks about hating himself for this world. That was the year after his father left. The same year, I think he was 13, he spray painted Angelina Jolie in purple on a big piece of plywood.
You went with double parentheses.
Yeah, I was thinking about doing parentheses and parentheses, but then I was like, I'm tired.
Okay, I'm tired. Tell me what the parentheses in parentheses meant for you, or what it would have done for you.
It would have been like more of an internal, like feeling like the poem, like the speaker, I guess his thoughts were getting more layered into me, and then that would have also been the effect of like the double parentheses, just like we're trying to go with like more meta, I guess.
So we're kind of each parentheses is sort of like a new layer of internal.
That's how it feels with the poem, like it keeps shifting into more and more like internal past unraveling.
Yeah, unraveling. It's a good word. Yeah. So the parentheses are kind of these a new layer, which are peeling away the onion.
Layer.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. And you can hear the way that you intend us to do this.
Oh, chest fine mulch dyed the color of hair, dyed bright red, and the year my ex bought cocoa bean, mulch, and our lives smelled like Hershey. Pennsylvania? I guess those are the things I didn't appreciate enough. I appreciated other things, like what I remember.
Yeah. Talk to me about those choices.
I think a lot of it is just how I split it up in my head. Like, I think the color of hair dyed bright red, split up kind of, and I think it sounded more like a, not an aside, but like an extra bit of information. And then for the my ex part, I think for me, when I see things like that, it's usually because I'm writing in missing information, like in essays or things like that. Like maybe if they like blocked out the name and they just put my ex instead of the name. And then for the dashes, mostly for me, that's a stylistic choice when I'm writing. I think it looks cool. I think it's a better pause for me than a comma a lot of the time, just because it's like separate but still in the same thought. And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that dash or weekend dash, sort of like simultaneously pushing things apart, but then like kind of holding them together as well. I like dyed red. You said additional information. I read it as kind of like, you believe that? Like dyed red, like disbelief, right? There's a tone, a specific tone that I get when I get there. And it's so interesting. You said writing in missing information. At the end, we have like when I remembered in parentheses, and so I kind of started to associate. You also have Pennsylvania question mark. So it's like I associated parentheses and brackets with the sort of attempt at remembering, the attempt at recall. So I think it's interesting. The X is also in sort of brackets as well. Like I've kind of also forgotten, but yet I have to kind of recall this unfortunate maybe memory in this case. But there are ways that you sort of set a pattern for us and we start associating, right, certain things with particular punctuation that you're using. Now I'm thinking, okay, anytime I see punctuations, this is an attempt to remember. This is a memory sort of being brought back into the space. We also have a hope, just a hope at the beginning, which I thought really kind of sets the tone as well. Yeah, what if we had just started here? How do we read that? Pennsylvania. I guess those are the things I didn't appreciate enough. How do we read that? direct address. And I just put a comma there, right? But that can do a lot of work, okay? Anyone else would like to share digging down the bold and higher conversations? How are you feeling good? That's fine, because you're sharing it anyways. Okay, our final exercise that we're gonna do together. You don't have any text to rely on, you have to come up with this all on your own. I know, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. But I'd like for everyone to leave here with at least something that they can come back to and maybe make into something else. So for this exercise, I want you to write a sentence, but we'll just say a text because depending on how you use your punctuation, it might be more than one sentence, right? But I want you to write a piece of text that italicizes at least one portion and that uses one of each of the following punctuation marks in the brackets. So for the colon/semicolon, you can use either one of those. Parentheses or brackets, you can use either one of those, or both if you're feeling fancy. And then the slash or the ellipsis, you can use either one of those. But period, a colon or semicolon, parentheses or brackets, an in dash, a slash or an ellipsis, and one instance, at least one instance of structure times. Okay. And now you're gonna really think about what other punctuation is doing, there's gonna be a lot going on. Okay. So I'm gonna give us 6 minutes, 1 extra minute, because you gotta come up with this all on your own. If we're still stressing and struggling at the end of 6 minutes, I'm happy to give us an additional.
About 2 minutes left. One minute. All right, trying to go ahead and wrap up your piece of text. And 2 volunteers. We're gonna put them on this side this time. One more.
Well, they're writing this. I have a question. I'm really curious about when you started thinking this deeply about punctuation. Was there something that you were doing in your own homes that led you to think more about it, or something you read?
I think when I started writing Phantoms, I had no choice. It really kind of forced me to think about punctuation. And so my introduction to form is kind of like 8-week intensive formal boot camp, where I was given a form at the beginning of the week, and I was like, either like, here are the rules, and then here are like 3 additional crazy things that I want you to do, and I was sent out to the wild, and by the end of the week, I had to come back with a thing done. And I think also that introduction of just having to figure it out so quickly, but also having these additional constraints on top of what I already had to think about, I really had to figure out some ways to wiggle out of those restraints, especially when it came to the Pantu. And punctuation has been like the most reliable thing. But then I also saw how it kind of bled out into other forms as well. And I think I've just never really stopped thinking about it as a result.
And did some of those poems from the boot camp end up in the book?
They're not in this book, they're in my first chapbook. A lot of those are in Bloodborne. Yes, yeah.
She always does a thorough job.
Sounds like fair. Alright. Sounds about yourself.
I think Aqua, has invisible markers.
I froze.
You froze.
Yeah.
What happened?
I mean, I only have so little to say. I think if you stay in California this summer, you understand.
Okay, we'll talk to me about your English.
Because when I was July in California, I was intending for you to be a non-pause and like for you to sing. Like, consider how July is in California. June was a big summer.
Yeah, thinking, when I see that, I'm thinking of like, when someone says picture this, and they kind of want you to like imagine a very specific scene, it's like July, picture this July, California.
Yeah.
And then you kind of go off into these other bright descriptions, or these additional descriptions, on top of what I already have in my mind just from July, California, right? So sort of, let's start here, and then I'm gonna build on top of it. Yeah, okay. Talk to me.
I was thinking of a letter
Mhm.
format with all of those different types of texture. And then I was just thinking about like a person writing to a friend that is not in California, but reading down on it. To me, they seem doubtful of like when they will see this person again. But they're also so polite too, but also not, with like, let me know instead of please, but ending with thank you. And coming up with random things to do just to have like a connection with that person.
Yeah, so the doubt that sort of comes through, the uncertainty of if this is gonna happen, maybe a sense that this person is maybe flaky, or maybe the friendship isn't as strong as the person writing the letter would like, right?
Yeah.
We have a Miss Dearly, will you be in California, dash again, which to me suggests two things. One, that they were in California, maybe you saw them previously, or the other, which I'm more inclined to believe, that they've been in California and they did not see you when they were in California that last time. So it's like, when are you gonna be here again? So we can try this again, right? I miss your face and laugh and smile, in parentheses, it's not the same scene on mine, which putting it in parentheses, it feels like this is a vulnerable moment. I don't really want to admit this, like it kind of feels separate from the rest of the letter, like I want this to stand out because it's kind of uncomfortable for me to admit a vulnerable moment here. And then we have, I made a list of all we can do, again, right, the unreliability, schedule, we don't know what's going on. Coffee, are you gonna be out partying, are we gonna have to do 1 a.m., or are you gonna have to do 1 p.m.? I don't know what you're doing, I don't know what you're up to. And then again, sort of, please let me know, again, kind of wanting to be accommodating, but then also kind of maybe making the last minute decision to be more straightforward, right? After being so uncertain, having the please there, but then actually being like, no, like, let me know, I deserve for you to let me know. Yeah, so we have all these fluctuations, those that are sort of communicating this doubt and this uncertainty. That sort of come through, just because we just smash this in parentheses and other things in there.
I like the list too, because it's as if, okay, in case I'm not good enough to see, if that's not enough for you, then you can also go paragliding.
Right. Right, or coffee at 1 a.m., which is, right, dancing at 4. Yeah, having these things, because they're also understanding. Yeah, yeah, okay. Any other questions or concerns? Anything else you would like to share about your?
That's fun.
Yeah, okay. We're at the end of our hour, right into the one I want to leave a bit of time, just in case anyone has questions, and I know you guys probably have to go off to classes and other things. So, does anyone have questions?
How do you feel about the semicolon? Because I have heard poets say that it's a business kind of punctuation.
A business punctuation.
Yeah, it's sort of snooty or more formal, and it doesn't belong in poetry. The first poets say that, and then there's the other issue of people not knowing how to use the semicolon.
I love semicolons. I think they do something different than. You love semicolons too? Yeah, yeah. I think they just do something different than colons do. I feel like a regular colon is often just sort of tacking on or describing something that comes before it, and then the semicolon, it can kind of, it has a little bit more freedom, in my opinion, to move away from what kind of comes before it. So I just think they have different functions. But I love it. I love the semicolon. Yeah. Did you? Okay.
Any other questions? All right, well, let's thank Taylor Byas. And if you actually do produce something from that exercise, send it to Julia or me so that we can share it with Taylor, and see if you actually come up with something more poem-like, or if you're in a fiction class, a little bit of prose. So if anything comes of this exercise, share it so we can celebrate that with you. And then come on back at 4 o'clock to hear the poems. Thank you.